Hello and welcome to our program Where God Weeps, a program where we speak about the situation of the suffering and persecuted church around the world. Our program today is coming to you from the Benedictine Monastery of Wigwam, here in South Korea. This is not the first presence of the Benedictine community in the Korean peninsula, however. This occurred in the early 1900s in a region in what is today North Korea, called Tokwon. The Tokwon community in the 1900s was serving a flourishing Christian community in Korea. Christianity was growing, and the monks, brothers, sisters, and priests were serving pastoral care and also giving education to the local people. This came to a brutal end in 1948 with the emergence of the regime of Kim Il-sung, the first dictator of what is today North Korea. To tell us more, it's my great privilege to welcome Father Bartholomeus, a Benedictine monk here in Wigwam, South Korea. Father Bartholomeus, thank you for being here today with us on our program.
It's a pleasure.
Father, 50 years here in Korea. What would you say the faith of the Korean people has taught you in these 50 years?
Yes. The faith of the Koreans is strong. It's not just superficial. So it has become a church now which is very much involved in charitable work. To practice the command to love your neighbor, to do as the Good Samaritan did. Yes, and exactly this verse from the parable of the Samaritan is written in stone at the entrance of our diocese here, which belong to here. That's the Archdiocese of Daegu. And another feature: Koreans are quite missionary, very motivated to hand on their faith. And there is a huge structure behind that. So up to this day, most conversions in the Catholic Church in Korea, they are facilitated by the endeavors, by the prayers. They pray a lot also. They pray the rosary together once a week. Yeah. And through, they visit the people, and they console them when somebody dies. So they are very missionary conscious. And up to this day, the Korean church is not completed. It continues to be. It
continues to grow.
Yes. They are now, even now, there is not now so much explosive missionary growth in Korea, but it continues.
It continues.
And all the parishes, they have catechumens, adult catechumens, to prepare for baptism, usually close to about 30 to 50 people a year in each parish. That makes for a lot of people. Yes.
What was the situation in Korea in the 1948-49? Because before its separation, was particularly in Pyongyang in the north, was a vibrant Christian community. The church was very strong. There were a lot of churches that had been built. Just to give a bit of a picture about Christianity in the north in the early 1900s, the period that preceded this terrible period of persecution.
Yes. It was a Protestant thing, it was not Catholic. The Catholics came already 100 years earlier to Korea, and also they had very surprising developments. And the Catholic Church of the first century, the century of the persecution, they produced more than 10,000 martyrs, which is very...
An extraordinary witness.
It is, yes. After that, as soon as the borders of the countries were opened for religion. And during the Catholics, when they worked during the first 100 years, it was everything undercover. It was in secrecy, without permission, and you did everything at the risk of your life. And then in 1884, the Protestants started, and they combined their missionary work with medical work and with modern medical work, modern hospitals, and modern education, universities, and very good pastoral work.
Little by little, it came from.
And then there was a big revival movement in 1907 in Pyongyang, which almost was a tide which covered the whole country. Yes, so it was a real spring, and because so amazing it was that at that time, North Korea, not so much North Korea, but Pyongyang was called the Jerusalem of the East, of East Asia.
So the Christianity, this, as you say, the springtime of faith in the early 1900s. Now, for the Benedictines...
That was, yes, early 20s.
Early 20s, early 1920s, okay. Yes. You had a community in Tokwon, which is also in the north, but more out in the countryside. It was a much more isolated region.
Yes.
What was the importance of a monastery to this isolated country region of around Tokwon?
Yes, it's a huge region. The Benedictine missionaries, the Benedictine, were asked to cover, to work, to do missionary work by the Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith. That was in 1921. So that was only 12 years after the Benedictines came to Korea. They first started in Seoul, and then northeastern part of Korea, about 1/4 of the country. There were only 5 parishes in the huge area, and the mission was in poor condition. There was lots of work to be done, and the Benedictines came in, and it turned into a really flourishing mission over the years. Yes, so starting in the 1920s till the end of the 1940s. Yes, the parishes grew, and each parish had its own school. And
I was going to say, because as the Protestants focused on, as you mentioned, hospitals and clinics, the Catholics much more on education. What was the meaning and the importance for the local people? They would have been probably Confucian tradition.
Buddhist.
And Buddhist. What would have been the importance of the Catholic education and the Catholic teaching to the local people at that time? Because it was a very stratified culture. Women were not necessarily educated. So how important was the monastery in recognizing the dignity of the individual?
The center of the parish is the parish itself, the church and the services there. And I think all the parishes, there was a school attached to it and a clinic. And maybe they learned from the spring of Pyongyang. Yes, that was in the years before. And that was a good inspiration for them, yes. It was not high-class teaching in their schools, especially also women who were not educated in those days. And they took care of the sick. That belonged to the missionary effort. Always, whether there has been a spring in Pyongyang or not, always charitable work and educational work has been a means of expressing our love for the people, and in this way also for God.
And the people were receptive?
Yes. It was very successful. It became a flourishing mission, but then the times changed. With the end of the Second World War, or Pacific War here in Asia, that was in 1945, the northern part of the country, that meant also our missionary territory, which was the northeast part of the country, called Hamgyong province, that became more and more communist governed territory.
Supported by the Soviets at the time.
Yes, first there was no Korean administration, it was not available. So there was a Russian occupation, you can say. They controlled the country, and they made the decisions. But they worked, as the years went by, for establishing a new government there, and it had to be according to their
a communist government,
to their policy, a communist government, and that happened in 1948.
Officially, there was a transition in 1948, and Kim Il-sung, the first...
He was a driving force. He was educated in Moscow, and he also spent some time as a guerrilla fighter, and he was a charismatic personality. He also had a Christian background, but he left it.
He abandoned the faith.
Yes, his parents were Christians, his grandfather was a Presbyterian minister.
He developed a personality cult, but was that at the beginning or did that come only later? What was the original intent of the first government that he and the Soviets established?
I think the personal cult that developed over the years. It was not at the very beginning.
Not at the beginning.
There was so much to do. Yes, that the country had to establish himself and to take care of that new country and So in order to solidify his leadership, he more and more went into this direction of a personality cult. So now, up to now, his family is ruling the country.
That's correct.
His grandson is now ruler of Democratic Republic of North Kim
Jong-un. This period, at the same time, ushered in a great persecution of the Christians.
Yes, it started, but it was restrained by the Russians, who had the control during the first years. And I know from the report we have from the Martyrs, they were afraid of the times the Russians would be gone. They said, well, that will probably be the end of the mission. And it turned out that way.
What do we understand by the first persecution of the Christians in those early days? What was happening? It was, first of all, perhaps the question, why did Kim Il-sung start to persecute the Christians? What was the threat that he saw with the Christianity?
Well, he was a hardcore communist. And according to communist ideology, religion and atheism, communism is atheistic. This does not fit together. So it's a stumbling block, and you have to
get rid of the stumbling.
You have to take this out of the way, yes.
What do we understand by the first persecution? What happened?
During these first years, all kinds of obstacles for administering a church and taking people away, put them into prison. And then there was more and more pressure on the missionary stations in the country, and one could foresee that this would lead, as soon as the Russians were gone, to the closure or the destruction of missionary work in North Korea. Yes, they foresaw it. And they also knew that this would be threatening for them, for the missionaries. And I think it was heroic. They didn't spend a thought of leaving the country. Yes, they could have.
They could have easily at that time.
They could at that time till many North Koreans they felt uneasy in the country, in this so aggressive towards Christians. They fled to the south, and it could be done. I know you cross the border, you give some money to the people who watch the border, and many fled to the south. Yeah, it could be done, but nobody did.
Now, what happened in 1949 when the first direct persecution on the monastery started to take place?
The first thing started already a year early in 1948, when the administrator of the abbey was put into prison because he was accused of withdrawing taxes and producing wine. They did produce wine, mess wine there, illegally. In those days, the monastery provided all of Korea with the wine for mess, yes. But these charges did not materialize. There was no proof. So he could return to the abbey, but this was the first warning shot. And the next warning shot was more serious when people came and accused the abbey of printing subversive material, anti-communist materials. This indeed happened, but it happened without our knowledge. It was done probably by agents of North Korea. Yeah? So this was a way to shut down the abbey. So these were the forebodings of what was coming. And then late in 1948, the People's Republic was founded. It became, and the Russians left. So soon after that half a year later, the monastery was closed. That was in May 1949, yes.
And what happened to the monks and the priests and the sisters?
The monastery came in the middle of the night, and first they took away the superiors and some other leading persons from the monastery, four person, and the police stayed behind in the monastery and gave all the orders. And during these days, even though the close of the monastery was very imminent, they continued their monastic prayers as if nothing had happened. But they prepared necessary things for saying Mass, maybe in a strange location. They gave a bottle of Mass wine to each member, yes, to carry it along, and they packed up some special equipment to make hosts to be used for Mass. Then they were taken away. They had a long train trip for 13 hours without a drop of water and without anything to eat and completely cold. They spent some months in prison in Pyongyang, and that was a very difficult time.
Torture?
Not torture, no. There was quite a bit of communication going out of that prison, because one of the wards, he was very much impressed by these German missionaries, and he became later a Christian himself, and he was particularly impressed by the prior, Father Lucius wrote, and the way these people dealt with each other. And he facilitated that little messages on pieces of paper, which are still in our monastery in St. Etienne. They are still available, these messages. They could be sent outside to inform other members of the community about what was going on behind walls.
So the hard persecution hadn't really started. It was first a prison in Pyongyang.
Yes, but the prison conditions, for instance, it is written up in one of those notes. A little chamber, a little room, 8 square feet for 18 people. There was not enough space to lie down on the ground. So they had to sit during the day like this, and they weren't supposed to talk. They did all this in a very low voice. And when they slept at night, they had to turn on their side to be able to sleep. And then you cannot spend all the night that way. They had to turn. When they took a turn, there was a command, turn to the other side. It's the way that they lived. No beds on the floor, the ground, no heating. Yes, it was. So some people died in prison. The first one who died was the bishop, the abbot bishop, Bonifaz Sauer. Yes, he was already sick when he entered. He has asthma.
Asthma. Then what happened? They were moved.
Majority was moved to a concentration camp called Oxfordok, hundreds of kilometers to the north. And the main criminals, they were left there, who were supposed to serve years and years of
hard labor,
of prison life. And these are the ones who died first, because they were in prison, and then in 1950, the following year, the war broke. The war started, and Korean War in June, 25th of June in 1950. And later in the war, only 2 or 3 months after the war had started, the troops of the South and of the United Nations, they moved north. And they moved also back to Seoul. Back had been occupied by the communist forces. And then also they moved up to Pyongyang. And before they reached Pyongyang, they took out the prisoners and killed them by the thousands, and also our confreres in prison. Yes, they didn't take them along. So those who were sent to the concentration camp, they lived longer.
Oh, yes.
But also in the concentration camp, many died because of the harsh conditions.
But they were still able, you have some items in your museum, they were still able to celebrate Holy Mass. They were still
later
able,
in the concentration camp.
they were still able to exercise the faith in hiding, of course.
Yes.
But
I'd like to say something more about the life in prison when they were in this cage, like a cage. They would say prayers together, the Rosary, even the Breviary. They knew parts of the Psalms by heart. They cited, and in a way that they could not be listened to or heard to by the guards, because they would stop that. And they even preached. They celebrated dry masses in that, masses without bread and wine, but I think they were very holy masses. They heard in that place, and that was a consolation to them, a church bell ringing. Oh, there's church, still some church is still functioning. And they celebrated Mass, a dry Mass, without the consecrated bread and wine. So to do that in such a situation with such martyred body, this spirituality, it is amazing. It is amazing to me, yes. And it was the same in the next place, in Oxford, in the concentration camp there, where they stayed with an interruption. There was, when the UN forces even moved to that place, they had to go up to the Yala River and up to into China. They stayed there, including this so-called death march, for 4.5 years. And it was a terrible situation also there, hard labor. They lived together, and there was an extremely good atmosphere. The community spirit, the faith they had in God and to each other, the way they treated each other, helped each other. It was so strong that I heard from two sisters when they celebrated their 50th anniversary of leaving that camp in nearby Taegu. I was at that Mass. And they said on that day, it was also the Cardinal, Kim Su-han was present at that time. They said, yet, in spite of all this hard labor, of all this disease and all this hunger and all this bad treatment, it was the best time. It's, you know, it's a different level. It's a different level.
It's a mystical level.
It is a mystical level, yes. You know, all this, well, it's according to the Sermon of the Mount. Blessed are the poor, for to them is the kingdom of
heaven.
God. Yes. So it is a mystical thing, yes. And it is wonderful that they did not feel any hatred for their gods.
So there was one bishop and 37 companions, 38 altogether.
There were more. The 38 are the martyrs, the number of the martyrs.
That's it.
Of so-called Tokwon martyrs.
That's correct.
Yes. And among these Tokwon martyrs, not all lived at that concentration camp. They lived more than 40. Not everybody died. Yes.
So
yes, and 25 of these, they died as martyrs of Benedictine brothers and priests and sisters.
What can we do, Father?
For them? Give them hope. For instance, through what you are doing, good radio programs or television programs. They are made through clandestine channels, made available for them. And good preaching, good books. Well, books. When I went into North Korea, I've been there a few times, I brought my Bible, I had to show it, and when I got out again, I had to show it again to prove that I did not give it to somebody. Yes. And then here our Abbey is helping a Catholic hospital in North Korea. It's called International Catholic Hospital Razon. It is in our former mission area. So this is a concrete way to build trust and to help people who are very much in need of medicine. We send medicine there regularly. And they have a big hospital there.
But I suppose...
Let's not give up hope.
And prayer.
Yes, we can pray for them.
But we don't give up hope.
Yes. I'm now quite advanced now in age, but my hope is, I've never been to the place we are talking about, Tokwon, but it is our parent abbey here of Waegwan Abbey. I hope that I will see the day when I can go back to that place and continue the mission which has been done so wonderfully by our forefathers, and to have another spring
of the faith.
Yes, spring. Yes, of Tokwon. Yes.
Father Bartholomeus,
yes.
Thank you for having been with us today in our program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having been with us today in our program, Where God Weeps. And if you'd like to know more information about the situation, the story of Catholics in North Korea, I would encourage you to look at this contact information at the end of the program. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.